Right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Community and Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Item 1 on the agenda is to receive any apologies for absence.
We have apologies from Councillor Dave Edmonds. Councillor Moses Ian Gunwayna is here as substitute, and apologies from Councillor Pauline Jorgensen.
Okay, any other apologies? No. Okay. Item 2 is to approve as correct the minutes of the meeting of the 8th of July. Can I have anyone to move acceptance that was here? Opposed? Any seconded? Anyone not in favour of adopting or approving? No, thank you.
Show of hands.
Sorry, can I have a show of hands for the minutes? I tend to do things by. Are there any matters arising that aren't covered on the agenda this evening? Well, okay. Any moving on to the next item, declarations of interest. Does any member have any interest to declare in any item on the agenda this evening? No. Moving on to public question time. Are we aware of any questions, or we have any questions for tonight?
There's no public or member questions for tonight.
Okay, so skip through the next one. On to the next agenda item, which is the playing pitch strategy. And I think what I would just like to say on this before we sort of start is I'm going to propose that we defer this item to the next meeting. Primarily, I'm sorry, may I have a seconder for that?
I'll second that.
Thank you, George. The reasons for seeking deferment is this is a massively important piece of work for the future of the borough and relates to so much we're going to be discussing in the coming weeks. And I think that what's happened is that we've had some documents that have been uploaded into mod.gov, but haven't been made available to everybody. We've had some late documents that have come in, which are the appendices this evening. There's a couple of other question marks over the sort of the cover sheets and some other pieces as well. So I think because of the vital importance of this piece, and I'm very aware that this has been sort of 2 years in the making, 2 years plus. And what I want to do is make sure that this committee has ample opportunity to provide its input and its scrutiny to this sort of massively important piece of work. And ordinarily, I wouldn't seek to move a deferment, but I think in the situation that we face ourselves in, that the right course of action to give it that proper consideration is to defer it. And I apologise for officers who may be on the line and to colleagues across the room who've turned up for this item. George, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Just to say that, as you say, this is a very important part of what residents expect the Borough Council to provide, and I don't think we can be discussing, scrutinising, or even making a approving the recommendation based on partial information. So, as I am seconding this, I completely agree with deferring it to the next appropriate time. Grateful
for the support. Does anyone have any other issues, any topics I want to just cover on the motion? And can I just very quickly see a show of hands to move this to the next meeting? Great, thank you very much. And apologies for those online that joined for this meeting, and to apologise for colleagues at the other end of a table who turned up specifically for this item. Look forward to having a full conversation at the next possible available moment. Well, you don't want to stay for the whole meeting. Oh. Great. And so we'll now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is meeting the new housing regulatory standards. I'll pass over to Councillor Stephen Conway.
Thank you, Mark. I'm just going to say a very few brief words of introduction and hand over to Helen, who will give you a full presentation and answer any questions you've got, I'm sure. The purpose of bringing this before you is really to inform you on the changes to social housing regulation, the appointment or the creation of the role of regulator of social housing. and the powers that are given to the regulator of social housing. So a new piece of legislation was passed into law on the 20th of July 2023, day after my birthday, and it introduced new regulatory standards that all social landlords are required to meet, and those requirements came into force this last April. There's a summary of some of the key things on the first page of the presentation, but I think Helen is best placed to take you through this. Obviously, if there are any political questions anyone wishes to ask, I'll do my best to field them. I don't think this is really a political area, but Helen will be able to answer any technical questions you've got. So thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
Welcome, Helen.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen. And hopefully you can see the presentation on the screen.
Sorry, could you, for the sake of us with eyesight challenges, make it full screen?
Yes, I can. Just bear with me.
I'm not saying that applies to me. I'm just, just in case anybody else in the room was thinking it.
Just being very public spirited.
So hopefully is that large enough? Can you see that?
We've got the presenter mode, so we can see it's the other view I think we need to see.
So it looks on my screen. I have a full screen, so that should be a full screen for you as well, hopefully.
No, we've yeah, other way around. So we've got the screen that you should have, and you've got the screen that we should see.
How's that?
That's perfect. Thank you.
There we go. There's the first test.
Teams.
Okay, thank you, everyone. As Stephen says, this is really an overview of the Social Housing Regulation Act, which is dated last year, but effectively came into force this year. It's key legislation. It's a milestone, as the report says, in the government's response, mainly to the Grenfell tragedy, and also the sad death of little Awab, who died in a property ridden with damp and mould. It is the biggest change to any regulation we've had in the social housing sector for well over a decade. Essentially, it introduces regulatory standards for all social landlords, so local authorities, registered providers and arm's length management organisations, set standards, consumer standards for social housing. It gives broader powers to the regulator. The regulator has existed for some time, but not in its current format. So there's significant powers that the regulator has as a result of this act. And I've just summarised what it requires us to do. So in the days gone by of social housing in the olden days, we had short notice inspections. They've brought those back. So we can be given 28 days notice that the regulator is going to come and inspect us to make sure we're complying with the standards that they've set us. We'll need to ensure that our systems and our documentation is available to present to the regulator to evidence that we're doing that. Damp and mould, again, is a key part of this, as well as the other hazards, asbestos, fire, water, all the other health and safety issues that we should deal with as a responsible landlord. And the regulator has the power to conduct a survey on any of our properties with 2 working days notices, and advise us to carry out emergency remedial work or do it themselves with only 24 hours notice. Now, that's a very worst case scenario, but it's something we need to be alive to. We need to watch the number of complaints we have. Our complaints is not anything I'm particularly concerned of in terms of them being too many of them, although the one complaint is too many. If we were to be receiving a large number of complaints for the number of properties that we manage, the regulator, it would flag up a red light, and they would probably intervene a lot quicker, and they may even inspect us quicker than they'd planned to. Another part of the legislation is to ensure that senior housing managers hold housing management qualifications. So that's professional standards for the housing sector, which is level 4 or 5. So that's really HND degree level from the CIH. I've noticed recently that other providers have thrown their hats in the ring to provide this training. So I'm probably fairly sure it won't just be the Chartered Institute that will be giving out housing qualifications. Will be other people authorised to do that. And at the bottom, the non-compliance with the legislation is serious. This is not an option. We do have unlimited financial penalties. We will be named and shamed. The Ombudsman will do the same in terms of complaints, and this would be in addition to any criminal or other legal proceedings for non-compliant with health and safety legislation, the like of which we're seeing in the Grenfell Tower inquiries. So we've known about this for a while, even though the legislation is relatively new. At the end of last year, October last year, we commissioned an external company called Pennington's, and they are experts in this field, to look at the compliance in terms of building safety, how we're providing safe, comfortable homes that are compliant with all the different standards we have to meet. We now have a housing improvement programme, and that specifically concentrates on compliance. In fact, the improvement programme started life to accommodate this Pennington's report. The Housing Policy and Performance Team and Strategic Housing have reviewed the service. This is way before it came into force, just to make sure we were actually ready for this legislation. So we know what we've done, we know what we need to do, and we have a plan for where we've got gaps. The review is the 4 standards of regulatory compliance. So these are the 4 sort of golden threads really that run through the legislation, which is safety and compliance, ensuring our buildings are safe, ensuring that our gas safety checks are up to date, ensuring our electrical certificates are in place, ensuring we've got asbestos management in plans, ensuring our damp and mold is being dealt with or eradicated. So that's the first one, and that's probably one of the biggest ones. The transparency and accountability all writes into statute that we need to involve our customers in everything that we do. So it's the nothing about us without us. We make sure that our customers are fully informed, that have a say, they have a voice, and that we listen to what they're saying. The decisions that we make are transparent. Neighbourhood and communities and tenancies, that's where we look at the housing management, how we manage our tenancies, how we interact with our clients, how essentially we deliver our housing management functions. So those are the 4 main headings. So what we've found and what we've done, Pennington's, we now have a action plan, which is red, amber, and green in terms of how urgent the issues are. Everything that's been red has a plan in place or has been completed. We've got new compliance policies, and we've now got a separate damp and mold policy. So damp and mold isn't quite yet as important in terms of legislation as things like asbestos, electrical and gas safety, but we know that it will be. So we now treat damp and mold as the same as if it was a statutory obligation. So all the health and safety regulations, including the consumer standards, are included with that compliance policy. The way we report on this is a compliance scorecard, which is what the regulators asked us to do. These are reported to me, and I onwardly report that to the talent volunteers, and also corporate leadership team has oversight of this. There's quarterly returns to the Corporate Health and Safety Board to make sure that in terms of safety, we're doing what our action plan says we need to do, and the compliance scorecards will highlight any gaps we have. One thing that the Pennington's report did show is that we need to be more forward thinking in terms of our data collection. So the compliance scorecard is now being used as a base for how we keep a record of compliance performance data. So where we don't have a compliance scorecard for the things like tenancy management, we're using that as a baseline to design that in. So that's not something that's a gap in the service. It just makes us more robust in terms of how we report our performance to tenants and to corporately. Part of that again is IT. There's a big program of improvement on the housing improvement program. So how we use IT, how we use the information that we have, when we've gathered that information, what we do with it. We've got a project manager who's coming online to assist with that. So that's one of the things that's a work in progress. We've also met with the regulator. Myself, George and Rhiann met with the regulator in May. Very friendly, open, honest conversation, what they expect of us, what we should expect of them. The regulator is not trying to catch us out. They don't want any housing provider to fail. What they said was, we're on the list. It will happen in 2 years in terms of an inspection. We don't know when that will be. I've got no reason to think that we're on sort of the hit list of organisations that they're concerned about. But we should be able to be inspected and hold ourselves to account and have everything in order, whether we're being inspected or not. So we have the relationship with the regulator, whereas if we're unsure of anything, we can pick up the phone, have a conversation with them to make sure we're doing what they expect us to do. So the next steps are the delivery of the Housing Improvement Programme, which is led by me. We've redesigned that to include everything. So everything that's in this Act is now on that Housing Improvement Programme, which includes the training, updating our policies, looking at the tenant satisfaction measures, making sure the scorecards are doing what they're supposed to do, updating the policies as the legislation changes, because this is only the first, I imagine, of many pieces of legislation, that we have a programme of updating policies to make sure that we're ahead of the game so we can anticipate when they're going to need to be updated. We're going to do a dummy run of an inspection just to see how we do. We're going to try and do that before December. Now, that will be strategic housing that manage that, so I'm not marking our own work in housing operations. So in all intents and purposes, Frances will be the regulator who's head of strategic housing. She will run an inspection as if she was the regulator, so we can see what we could do better, how we could improve it, how we can make it more efficient. And finally, it's continuing to horizon scan. We have a new government. Obviously, this is legislation that was put into force by the outgoing government. And I do think this is something that everyone of any political persuasion is agreed with, that this legislation is the right thing to do. So I don't see that this will be repealed in any way. I'm expecting it to be built on. So the Renters Reform Bill, more changes to leasehold legislation are anticipated. So it's just making sure that we're not surprised by anything. There will be consultations that come out. We've already been invited to consult on some other things in the outgoing government, and this will happen again when they're looking at putting any proposed legislation in place. So it's just keeping a watchful brief and making sure that all the legislation that comes out that we're prepared for. So that's the summary of the legislation. I'm more than happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Great, thank you very much for that. Karen, your hand went up first.
Sorry.
George next.
Sorry. On page 24, you talk about the data management and reporting back. Will we see the reports coming through Scrutiny as a key performance in the future?
They will be part of the key performance indicator suite that goes to corporate leadership team. I'm actually unsure whether that comes to overview and Scrutiny, but it certainly will be information that's available.
Thank you.
George.
I think this is a little bit like the first item where the Pennington report came up a lot in this presentation, and about the feedback that got, and the recommendations from that. And of course, there's some outlined, but what we're being asked here is to review the council's preparedness for the changes without knowing all of the recommendations from Pennington's report. Now, I don't know if there are other recommendations in that report that aren't in your PowerPoint. So I don't know what I don't know. And so I'm sort of struggling here, a little bit like the first item where I just feel like we don't have it all. If I had the Pennington report, I think I'd feel a bit more comfortable on this one. So I don't know where that sets us, but I'm struggling with being able to put some strong questions across without that report.
Okay, I mean, the Pennington's report is exceptionally operational. It's very, very detailed. I don't think there's an issue with sharing it, but it's relatively, it's more like an action plan of how we would deliver operations. There's no problem with me sharing that at all. I can circulate that after the meeting if that helps.
Yeah, it may well help, but I think we're being asked to scrutinise something here in a way that we don't have it all. And I'm sure if it may well be very detailed and very operationally, but I suppose that's the purpose of this committee in a way, isn't it? To get into the weeds and ask the questions about paragraph 192, line 3. So yeah, it may well be good to have it afterwards, but I don't know what that means for this meeting tonight.
Just a brief comment, if I may. I think there are occasions when overview and scrutiny committees do need to get down into the weeds, as you put it, George. But what we're looking for primarily is strategic overview rather than engagement with operational activities. That's really the purpose, I think, of the operation. that you give us a sense of whether you think all of this is moving in the right direction, whether we're doing the right kind of thing, rather than whether we're complying with subsection 6, paragraph 8 of whatever it is. So I think there's a delicate line to maintain between getting involved in strategy and getting involved in operational matters.
Mary-Louise first, then Martin.
Bless you. Thank you. Yes, I'm like one of those drones. I'm going to zoom out again. It's great to see proactive regulation back on the menu. Yeah, because we've had years and years of it being dismissed. And we saw the result of that. I think it's important that we all acknowledge that this legislation came about largely because of Grenfell. It's not come out of nothing. It's come out as this enormous failing on the part of local government, and from the courage of our Bishak's mum and dad, who have pursued this so much. And I think it's important that we keep in mind where this came from in assessing its importance. Proactive regulation costs money, though, yeah. And I'm just wondering what the implications are. So 2 questions: what the funding implications are in terms of like extra staff, extra organizational capacity to do this. And the second is, this also refers to temporary housing, yeah? Does it? And does it also apply to the sort of like the housing of refugees in various forms? So I wasn't quite clear of how far outside the kind of formal social housing that we have. So those 2.
Okay, so it applies to all tenanted properties and licensed properties, which means that anybody that we house, which includes people who are refugees or people who are in permanent tenancies, we have to have the same safety standards for all of our customers, or everyone who lives in one of our properties will get the same safety standards. In relation to resourcing and staffing, this is a formalisation of what we should be doing anyway. I'm fairly confident that we are doing it. It's the way we report on it. So I don't see us having any vast extra resource needs. It's making sure that we can evidence what we're doing, and we've got the policies and procedures in the right format to back that up.
Sorry, one more. When you say our properties, does that include properties that we rent from, say, private landlords and put people in? Would these standards also apply to those? No,
we can ensure that we can make the standards apply to them, because we're their customer. So we will ensure that all of the houses and the multiple occupation that we house refugees in meet these standards.
Right, and we will take action where they're not.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just if I may, to reinforce Helen's point about this sets out what we should be doing, and we believe we are very largely doing this already. So I don't think it's going to have significant resource implications. As you know, Mary-Louise, we get regular reports at TLIP in relation to many of these items already, and we're already engaging with tenant volunteers on a very significant level, I think. So I think we can feel we're in a reasonably strong position. And I think, as Helen suggested, with the confidence she was expressing about our ability to cope with an inspection whenever it comes, I think we have a very good housing department that I think works incredibly hard to try and make sure we're doing the right things. And that includes in areas like damp and mould.
Martin.
Yeah, just a couple of things, really. The Pennington report, I mean, having in my previous life ploughed through documents like that, it's pretty hard going. And I'm not sure, as Stephen said, I don't think it's really what we should be doing, but looking at the principles. But perhaps a summary of the Pennington report presented to you, Helen, that we could compare with what you've done might be a way of answering concerns that we weren't aware of what Penningtons were saying. At least it would give us pointers as to where we might look at the strengths and weaknesses. Then the second one was really great to see you using IT to improve your delivery. One of the things that has been a problem in my previous life, which is where you, for example, mould. Anybody who's got a house knows what the problem is. It's the difference between going back and doing it every time, or whether you get an issue that comes up again and again, and you use that information to find out that we need a different solution that fixes it permanently. Would you envisage your IT system be able to deliver on that kind of information?
Yeah, I would exactly think. Well, we already have some systems in place that identify repeat damp and mold, where we have repeat cases, so we can identify the root cause. Because what we don't want to be doing is going every year and applying mold wash every November. We want to make sure we get to the root cause of the issue where we can. That's more easily said than done in older properties than is newer properties. Yeah. But certainly we have we will have an easier way of pulling down information so that we can show where we have trends, not just for property condition, but where we have got trends, so we can design out the need. We're trying to design out the problem rather than constantly respond to it. So yes, short answer to your question is the IT will make that a lot easier for us to do.
Good, great. And then final one really, if I know cost of regulation is a cost, but I come from an industry where the cost of not regulating, i.e. the cost of an accident, outweighs the cost of regulation many times over. So it may cost us to comply with regulation up front, but the consequence of not complying unintentionally and having an event would be very much larger. And we should look at the cost of compliance with regulation as an insurance policy to cut down costs and the risks for the council.
Moses.
Suppose this may be contained in the Pennington's report, but can you just give us an indication of what the compliance scorecard will look like?
Yeah, sure. It's what it says on the tin. It's a scorecard, and it will show how what percentage of compliance we have with the key themes of housing management. So that would be gas safety, electrical safety, asbestos management, water leaks, damp and mold, where we have gas capped. So it is what it says on the tin. It's a list of things that we need to comply with, and the percentage of how compliant we are, and if that's anything less than 100, what we're doing about it. So that feeds across from the asset team that I manage right through to housing services, so that they can pick up actions. The target is always 100%. So there's no room for manoeuvre. If anything is less than 100%, then it's not compliant. So where we have to put in measures to mitigate risk. So, for example, if somebody's asked for their property to be capped with gas because they don't want to use gas, that we don't just cap it and walk away. That's an example. So that scorecard will feed over, okay, this person's gas is capped. What do we do next? When did we last inspect it? So as a minimum, we will be inside every single one of our properties once a year. But the scorecard will show you what those percentages look like.
Okay, because you use the word risk, would there be a risk matrix?
Well, anything that's less than 100% is automatically a risk. The thing is with compliance, there is no room for error. So we can't say we're 75% compliant and then accept the rest as a risk. That even 1% is a risk. So anything that is causing us not to be 100% compliant is dealt with immediately to make sure that it becomes compliant. So we wouldn't have anything less than 100% from month to month.
Caroline.
I was going to make recommendation that after December, when you've done your dummy run, could we have it come back to us, plus with the pre-sale summary of the Pennington report, so we can see the two together and in action? Would that be okay? If you don't mind it coming back?
No, not at all. Not at all.
I think, and then that will allay the fears that we haven't actually seen the Pennington report itself. So the two together would be lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what the outcome is of that dummy run, because that will tell us what we need to know in terms of where the gaps are.
Yeah, and I think if we leave that to the right moment in time with budgets and everything else, or the budget setting process,
well, exactly.
I think I fully agree with that. I think that's an excellent way. So I think I don't have the recommendations or the summary in the mod.gov pack. So we might have to craft some of these as we go. But are there any other questions? Sorry, first of all. Okay, so I think if we like to move then that we note the report and the update this evening. Do you have a copy of the recommendations that were crafted for this?
Yeah.
I know they came around on a.
It's
again they're not in the pack, so it's difficult.
Like recommending committee scrutinises the report, so there isn't any specific recommendations that you guys come up with.
So then if I can move, then we note the comments to the report and the updates that we've had this evening, and that we request another update on this with the Précy copy of the kind of the key findings of the Pennington report, plus the output from the mock regulatory update, or sorry, not regular update, the mock inspection that we're doing later this year, and that then comes back to scrutiny, so that we can then look at the Précy of the Pennington report plus the actual kind of output from that first inspection. But other than that we note the direction of travel. George, do you want to add something to that?
Just want to say it's not quite what the document said. This was the purpose of the report and the recommendation. It's slightly different from what you're saying. And that's sort of my point around the Pennington report, because it says here the recommendation is the committee are asked to review the council's proposed response to preparing the introduction of the regulatory housing standards and what recommendations and or comments, if any, they wish to make. So we're being asked to review the council's proposed response. Well, that was my point. Okay, so I agree with what you're saying. I'm just making the clarification that's different from what was on this document, but I'm completely agreeing with what you're saying.
I think the other challenge, as I said, and I've highlighted this, is we'll need to take this back to democratic services, because although there's been copies of things flying around on email in mod.gov and in the public agenda pack, the recommendations aren't sort of in the one place. They're not in mod.gov. And I think from a scrutiny perspective, that all needs to be in one place. I can accept that we don't have the full copy of the Pennington report for a variety of reasons. But I think there's a lot in here that we are only able to note the progress and the update. It's as Mary Louisa said, it is great to see that sort of regulatory footing back. I'm glad to hear that we are, the update this evening has, given the direction of travel. I think there's a lot to take away from that. But I think the next step is we need to see what that full response is going to be after we've gone through that first sort of mock inspection process. Then I think we can add more detail. So at the moment, I think all we can do as this committee is note the update, thank the officer for that and the work that's being done to move us into this new setting, and then pick this up again in the new year when we have the output of the actual Pennington report, Précy, plus the output of that regulatory mock inspection. And I think that will then give us the completeness to be able to kind of move this forward for the betterment of our residents' lives. Is there anyone not agreeing with that? Can I have a seconder for that in that case?
Me.
Oh, seconded. Can I have a show of hands to note and bring back? Great. Thank you very much. Helen, thank you for that. Good luck with the mock inspection and all the work over the coming months. And I'm sure, as you say, there's more change yet to come that we'll need to bake in. But thank you for the update this evening.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You are more than welcome. Oh, she has gone already. Steve, would you like to say? I mean, you're more than welcome to stay if you wish.
No doubt the rest of your meeting will be.
I'm sure we'll all take it very personally, but thank you for attending this evening. Right, in which case then we'll move on to the action tracker. The work program. Sorry. We're moving on to the work program just to look through some of that. I note from that sheet for the minutes, there's one of the things that we need to do is sit down with Pauline as well and go through her piece of work, and that's going to be moved to the management committee. So I just want to make sure that that came up at the last meeting, and we're taking it to the next management committee, management meeting, to have a look at what the actual piece of work is, to how we bring that back through. So it hasn't been overlooked by this committee. The tracker is laid out. Are we having anyone talk to it, or are we just going to?
I just need to give a slight verbal update to the work programme. Since the agenda went out, the CLT have agreed which dates each different can't get the words out. The budget items, for all the different directorates, which dates they're coming to the committees. This was obviously something that was discussed at the last meeting, whether it was going to go to the management committee, which was not the idea of this committee. So we have dates. So for this, the medium-term financial plan overview will come to the 7th of October, and from the next meeting, for the 29th of October, we have adult social care and children's services, and then the 12th of November will be place and growth, and then the 17th of December will be corporate services. So they'll be put in there. There's going to be some things moved back to make space for those, so they're not. For example, the 7th of October is a very, it's got lots of items. It may be that some things are moved back. I know, for example, on the 29th of October, the immigration and borough of sanctuary items will be moved back to, I believe, December. Obviously, this will all be shown in the next work programme, but this is all revelation since after the agenda went out. So just to verbally update the committee on that those are being done at this committee, and they are not being missed out because they're going to a different committee. They are coming here. It's just the dates were proposed after the agenda had to go out.
George,
when will we see the updated schedule, the updated work programme emailed?
I can send it round straight after the meeting. It's obviously it won't be shown in the agenda until the next meeting, but the work programme is now updated. I can send it around whenever.
And as has been said, that's going to lead to some, our next meeting in October is somewhat busy. So comfortable shoes, and we'll crack on with it. But I think there'll be a lot of pre-reading for that as well. So I think what we just need to make sure is that all the reports are assembled, especially when it comes to some of the other items. That's not to say, I just want to reiterate that with all of those decisions and any change, that doesn't diminish the importance of some of the other pieces of work that were due to come through on those meetings, specifically things like the immigration updates of the report on the impact of immigration in the borough. Those are vitally important issues, as is the other issues that are going to possibly be pushed out as well. So that's not to reduce the importance. It's just we're going to have to try and find some room in the agenda for the next 2 to 3 months. And I hope we can all accept that. So with the changes yet to come, are we happy to note anything else? Is there anything else that needs to be raised? And then we'll get the updated programme round. If any member of the committee has any questions that come up from that revised schedule, just email them around and we'll collate and summarise. Happy to note? Excellent. And then moving on to the final item on the agenda is the action tracker on page 37 to 40 of the pack. Does anyone have any comments to add to the tracker? No? Okay. Are we happy to note the latest version of a tracker? Seeing anyone saying no? Okay. In which case, I don't think there's any urgent items of business. I call the meeting shut at 7:40.
Thank you.
Don't think the next one's
Come on.